Charlie, the show goes on, and it continues with Riley Gaines, who joins us in studio at 6th and Peabody.
How
back
exciting.
again. Great to have you back.
Good to be back. Thank you, guys.
A lot has happened since your last visit, right? And I think we opened up the last visit by saying that.
I was going to say it tends to be a trend at this point.
We will dive into many of the issues and the back and forth with Leah Thomas and Brittany Griner and more. But one of the questions I asked you was, are we going to see more women like yourself step up and push this forward, where what is a very obvious, at least to me, aspect of biological women competing against biological women? When will more women step up? Since then, Sage Steele, we've seen Samantha Ponder, Charlie, Megan Kelly, Martina Navratilova.
Right.
What's your takeaway, finally, of seeing all of this across the social media landscape? It's
amazing. It's, of course, almost tragic in a sense that it takes this much to get people to say something that is and should not be controversial. But it's great news. Outkick actually did a great job breaking a story where over 70 athletes signed on to this letter. And these were Olympians, these were world record holders, these are phenomenal athletes. So to have that kind of support, public support, I've had this support privately for a long time now, but to have it publicly, it's huge. And you can only imagine, I mean, courage begets courage. So it's growing, it's gaining traction, and I think it's only, the tide will continue turning. Was it the night at San Francisco State University and the assault that turned that to more public support, or was it way before that? You know, I do think that was a big part in it, which this whole thing, it backfired on those protesters. This really only quadrupled my social media following. I mean, this really only gave me more credibility, and it perfectly highlighted how unhinged these people who are in opposition of the views we're speaking can be. So I do think that was a big part in highlighting just how insane it is. I mean, let me reiterate, I was there at San Francisco University speaking about how men, it's unfair, based off my own personal experience, it's unfair for men to compete against women and change in our locker rooms. That's it. Yet it garnered that response, which was violent. And so I think that highlighted to a lot of people, this is the direction we're going. We're actively declining. So I do think that was a big part in it.
So since I've joined Outkick and I've been able to be more outspoken on this topic, like you said, you've had a lot of people reaching out to you, mostly private, about how they're in support of what you're saying. And I have so many women, former colleagues of mine, who can't make it public how they feel, but also a lot of men who say, thank you so much.
Totally.
I have 2 daughters. I can't imagine them growing up in an atmosphere where they don't have their own competitive space, and in the locker rooms, that's just another whole, sick situation we're dealing with. What is it going to take, though, for enough people to realize that this is just going down such an insane road? I mean, which it already is. We're seeing example after example of it every single day. For people to say, okay, enough is enough. And now, no matter if I do face the fear of being canceled, I can't be quiet any longer because this is really just getting super tragic. What's it going to take?
Sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better. Just this past week, we saw a cyclist who took $35,000 in prize money away from women. I just spoke with a high school volleyball player. She's a senior. She's from North Carolina. I'm sure a lot of the viewers have seen the video. She got spiked in the face by a male, where even months later, this happened last September, even now her vision is impaired. She's partially paralyzed on her right side. She's not playing college sports anymore. She has to have special accommodations at school for testing because she can't retain information due to the severity of her head injury. So it's going to take more of that. It's going to take more girls getting injured. It's going to take more girls losing out on opportunities. It's going to take more girls being forced to give up their consent in areas of undressing, which is, of course, awful. But truthfully, I think it has to get worse before it gets better, unless we have women who are willing to stick up. We have women, and again, this is also unfortunate, but willing to boycott, willing to say, I'm not going to get on the block. I'm not going to start at that starting line if I know I have to compete against a man. So I think those are the 2 routes, one of which a lot less girls lose out and a lot less girls are injured. And now in response to that, you have Brittany Griner, who's saying it's a crime, or should be considered a quote-unquote crime, to not
separate anyone for any reason.
If you're not against the trans lifestyle and how someone wants to live their life or be identified as, they should also be allowed to participate in women's sports if they so choose, and if you don't agree with that, that should be a crime.
This blows my mind that someone with this much athletic success, same thing with Megan Rapinoe, same thing with even Billie Jean King. I mean, Billie Jean King, she was a crusader for women's sports. We essentially have her to thank for Title IX. Yet these women, they're actively working to undermine their fight. It's beyond me. It's the same thing that we're seeing in both at the state and federal level with politicians. It's always women fighting against sex-based protections. Even Representative Katie Porter, she came out and said she disagrees with everything I say, disagrees with me as a person. And when asked, okay, what do you disagree with? She couldn't actually list anything. But it's women fighting against women. It's beyond me. I don't understand. I know women typically tend to be more agreeable. We tend to not want to ruffle feathers or step on toes, but that's how we've gotten here. We've been too agreeable for too long. And quite frankly, I'm sick of asking elite, both male and female athletes to use their voice because the silence at this point is deafening.
I know it's beyond you. I think it's beyond all of us to understand why, especially the athletes, wouldn't want to stand up for women, and what we've, gone so far to, we've gone through so much to get to the point we're at right now. So I guess my question is when you then hear women being called transphobic, or anyone who speaks out against this. I've been being called transphobic all week, which can be further from the truth, but it loses its meaning. And at this point, I don't care. Call me what you want, because this is something I believe in. And I know all I'm doing is standing up for women. Do you think that's the reason that these bigger names are afraid to say something? Because otherwise, what is their incentive?
I do think it's a bit of, they don't want to be labeled or seen as someone who's not inclusive or not kind, but we have to remind ourselves, it's not inclusive to allow men into our places and taking away our opportunities, taking our scholarships, our spots on the podium, our spot on the roster. That's not inclusive. It's exclusive. So I think it's just, we need to remind people of that. It's not kind or welcoming or accepting or tolerant or any of those terms they love to use to ask a girl to undress in front of someone of the opposite sex while he's simultaneously exposing himself. That's not kind. But again, speaking from my own experience, that is something that I had to think about at first. I didn't want to be labeled those things, but now I realize it's almost a term of endearment when someone calls me transphobic or a bigot, because it allows me to understand that I'm speaking the truth, because that's what that term means now. If someone calls someone transphobic, it means that they have no other argument against them, and that's what they refer to.
Riley Gaines in studio with us across the Outkick Network. So, You've told me before, like your coaches at Kentucky were awesome in regards to this, in response to this. Why don't we hear more from the coaching aspect of this, like your coaches would have done and have done? Right.
I've seen screenshots, and I swear I have them, of what the NCAA has said to coaches, emails that have been sent out. I actually got an email from one of the host reps at the Georgia Tech meet, or at Georgia Tech, which that's where our NCAA championships were last year, specifically highlighting if they were to speak out in opposition of that meet being hosted there, then they would face retaliation. They would face consequences. So these coaches, they're even terrified. Last year, I was nominated for NCAA Woman of the Year, to which Leah Thomas was as well. But I went to this big conference where they were announcing their winner, and I bought a booth inside the convention center where I was able to hand out pamphlets and different things, little bracelets explaining the benefits of Title IX. And every single athletic director who walked by, every single one, hey, keep doing what you're doing. And the first 60 or so, I was like humbled and just honored. I was like, this is great. They're all on our side. But after those first 60, it just turned into this feeling of frustration. Because if we're all on the same page, where's the discrepancy? Why are we catering to the minority if we all can agree here? Even the president of the NCAA, the former president, Mark Emmert, who doubled down on his stance publicly of allowing Leah to swim because he claimed it's based in evolving science, privately, he comes up and says, keep doing what you're doing, keep fighting, which shows the lack of leadership, the lack of authenticity, and the lack of a spine. These organizations like the NCAA, like ESPN, like Hershey's, Tampax, I mean, the list goes on, the lack of a spine they have.
And then it goes in line with the medal, the trophy, right? Like you
Absolutely.
tied, but they gave Leah the trophy that day.
Right.
Instead of you. Yours was shipped to you in the mail.
Right. And when asked, why, they said Leah has to have it for photos.
Oh my
So they
gosh.
reduced everything I'd worked my entire life for, not just myself, every female at that meet. This is the fastest meet in the world.
Yeah.
Everything we'd worked our entire lives for, 18 years, they reduced that down to a photo op to validate the feelings of a male. And that's really what thrusted me over the edge of understanding. Of course, I understood before the unfair competition was wrong and the locker room was wrong. But when they did that, that's when I was no longer willing to be silent. That's when I really saw what was at stake. When I was presented with that directly and they said those words, yeah, that's when I had had enough.
Even after the locker room where you were uncomfortable, others were uncomfortable, you had been following Leah because you saw the times, right? And you were asking your coach at the time, like, who is this pin swimmer? Even after all that, you wouldn't have done anything had it not been for that behind-the-scenes conversation.
I don't know. Of course, I would like to say yes, but it would have been really easy for me to just ride off into the sunset with my husband and going to dental school. And I scored in the top percentile in the DAT, which is the dental admissions test. And so I was geared up and ready for the next stage of life. And so it's sad to think looking back, it's sad to think it takes something like that to encourage someone to take such a common sense approach. And I would love to say I would have stuck up for myself, but I don't know, which is scary. I think that shows the state that we're at. I've always been someone who's a leader. I was team captain at University of Kentucky. I've always been someone who's unfaltering in my views, but I just don't know if I would have felt the need to take it public. But oh my goodness, I'm so glad I did, especially seeing how the trend has continued.
Where do you think the entitlement comes from with this? And I know that we could look at any quote from Leah Thomas and see the entitlement there, but it's being allowed.
Entitlement is a perfect word. I think what this really boils down to, and I don't quite understand this, is I think everyone wants to be a victim. Everyone wants to be oppressed. There's this appeal to being marginalized for some reason. And I think that's what this is. In regards to the trans movement, what we've seen a lot of is white men transitioning to women. And if you think about it, and this has required a lot of, the past year, my wheels have not stopped turning. But it's white men, typically, who are transitioning. And if you think about it, white men have never been a group who are marginalized or oppressed or victims of anything. And so it's a way for them to have less accountability and less responsibility, which is what everyone seems to be going towards. People don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to have responsibility. They would rather be a victim. And I think that's what this entitlement, it comes from. And so again, outsider looking in, how can someone like Leah Thomas actually be proud of themselves for taking away opportunities, for making girls feel uncomfortable in the locker room, for becoming this national champion, when in reality, anyone with a brain and a fifth grade understanding of biology knows that Leah Thomas is not the fastest woman in the nation, yet Thomas still prides himself in that.
Well, and also, the playing the victim. I mean, we are, a year or two removed from the 50th anniversary of Title IX, and ESPN is pushing all of that coverage. They're doing special programs based on this. And at the same time, turning around and honoring Leah Thomas at the ESPYs, where they're laying off, plenty of people that work for the company, but yet throwing an award show and a party, which is in part on behalf of Leah Thomas because they want people to tune in and listen. It makes no sense to me that they're championing one thing and then also turning around and doing the opposite.
No. The NCAA constantly, even last year at our NCAA championships where we had Leah competing with the women, they're passing out shirts that say equity. And I just want to slap them across the face with the dictionary because they clearly don't understand the definition of what equity means. Or, they do, but they just don't care. And that's exactly what we're seeing by ESPN. So many organizations. Women's History Month, they're honoring men. I don't understand how they can't see the double standard, the hypocrisy behind what they're doing. And again, I think they do see the hypocrisy. They just would rather ignore it. They would rather lie.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, how bad do you believe it can get? I know we can look at it from individual circumstances, more injuries or more records getting lost. But just as a whole, when you look at all of, how far it's come in such a short amount of time, even in the past year, how bad can it get?
I think take away the fairness in the sports piece and look at it from a bigger picture in terms of the silencing, in terms of the denying objective truth, in terms of the changing of the language we're using. They deem words like mother and breastfeeding and all of the sex-based terms, those are now offensive. And so looking at it from that perspective, it's already really bad. Again, I'm not someone who necessarily studied history. That was not my degree by any means. Yet anyone can open a history book and see this is Marxism, what's happening. And they can see how that turns out for societies and cultures. And so that's the direction we are going. So it's a lot bigger than women's sports. Look at what's happening in prisons. You have men who are convicted of awful, heinous things such as child pornography, kidnapping, rape, who now realize all you have to do to be a woman is say, I am a woman, which typically you get lesser charges. You get to be housed with women, which sounds awesome to a rapist. And they're getting in these women's prisons, and they're raping these women, and they're impregnating them. It's happened in Kansas, New Jersey, Ohio, and California in recent weeks. There's been over 1,300 men apply to be women to get into women's prisons. And so that's the bigger picture. That's how bad it can be, or how bad it can get. It's really the systemic erasure of sex and sex-based terms and blurring the line of gender, and it's really scary. Yeah, there's a lot going on here, and again, this is the direction that we are actively going. We are actively choosing to decline.
Riley, when did you overcome, or maybe you haven't, the fear of going public with this? You arrived by yourself today to our studio.
I did, right?
You don't have some security personnel with you? Yeah, I mean, how did you get past that aspect of what you're doing individually?
People call me brave all the time. They say, you're so brave, you're so courageous, but I don't feel brave. I don't feel courageous for doing what I'm doing. And so it really wasn't until the last week when I kept thinking about this, why don't I feel brave? Why don't I feel like I'm doing something that's honorable? And it really hit me. Again, this was only within the last 2 weeks, that the people calling me brave were just scared of different things. What they're scared of is being labeled all of the terms, transphobic, homophobic, racist, the list goes on. But that doesn't scare me. What's scarier to me is what the position I would take if I didn't speak up. Again, the denying of truth, that's when we've reached a point in society where there's no coming back. When you deny the sheer essence of humanity, I hate to break it to you, everyone listening to this, everyone in this room, we are here from a man and a woman. There is no other alternative, and they're asking us to deny that, to lie about that. And so that's what scares me. Not fighting for my little sister, who's the Tennessee state champion in gymnastics. I just got married, and I can only hope I get to have a daughter one day. Not fighting for her. That's scarier to me than what would happen if I didn't use my voice.
Yeah, it is really astonishing how many people, like you said, even will secretly come up to you and praise you. And the same has been for me in the past few weeks. And it's just baffling, because how can you sit by so idly and watch all of this horrible stuff happen? And it's snowballing. It's getting worse day by day. You just mentioned so many examples of it. It just does not make sense how people can go to sleep at night with a clear conscience, knowing that they're becoming part of the problem.
Right. And that's, I think, my message, especially to parents, is parents have to be willing to defend their daughters. Coaches, medical professionals, whatever that looks like, we have to be willing to stick up for them. At our NCAA championships, I was 21 last year, so I was an adult. I was old enough to defend myself, which I have done. But it still felt, in a sense, that the people who were supposed to be protecting us just simply weren't. Teaching your son's masculinity. I know we talk a lot about girls, of course, and women, but this applies to men too. We need men to be willing to stick up for their daughters. Masculinity, that seems to be a thing that is dwindling also by the day. And it's crucial. I think there's a saying, what is it? Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. It's a cycle, and I think we're in the portion now where it's good times create weak men. And so now we're in weak men create hard times. So I tend to see this kind of going through, and so we need to create strong men again.
What's next on the schedule for you? And by that, like, are you able to get in touch with Charlie Baker, the new NCAA president, unlike Mark Emmert, and actually sit down with him?
That has been something I have actively been trying to do for months. I have sent letters, I have sent emails, I have made public statements asking to please have a sit-down meeting, to which, of course, no response. Very similar to what we dealt with all last year, to when I did the exact same thing to President Mark Emmert. But that's definitely on my radar. That's something I would love to do. I welcome that. I really do. But what's next for me? It's continuing to get in front of state legislature, continuing to, even at the federal level, protect Title IX. The comment section closes May 15th for the proposed Title IX regulations, which are abysmal. It's worse than even self-ID policy, and so I encourage all of the listeners to go and comment on that. So yeah, just continuing doing what I've been doing. This issue, it's nowhere near being won, and I'm going to continue fighting every step of the way.
Follow Riley on social at Riley_Gaines_. I think that's still the one. It hasn't been deleted or canceled, right?
Has not been deleted again.
Yeah, they haven't taken you off. So yeah, at Riley_Gaines_. Independent Women's Forum spokeswoman, and just great to have you back in the studio.
And thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for everything that you've said and done.
Well, I appreciate you both, really. So thank you.